Hi there. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, rather, right? So I'm logging on today because I wanted to share a few words of knowledge and things I feel that I have received from the Lord, right? And I want to start off with two scriptures. And so we're going to start off with Hosea 4:6. My people are destroyed from lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I also reject you as my priest. Because you have ignored the law of your God, I will ignore your children. I wanted to say this, but I also wanted to say this in conjunction with Job 38, 4 through 11, right? Where God says, Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Who's laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who has stretched the line upon it? And both these scriptures, right, popped out to me because there have been things going on in the world, right, that I've been asking God a lot about. Specifically, what's going on with the Middle East, what's going on with all the strategic maneuvers. Like, I'm one of those people that does not watch the news because it's always bad news, right? But also because I know that I don't have the knowledge to even understand why some things are happening, right? So, geopolitically, I don't know why any of that stuff is going on. I can make my arguments as far as like, oh, well, we shouldn't be sending money to do this or that or what have you. But, that's just, am I stating these opinions for lack of knowledge, right? Am I stating these things because I actually don't know what the truth of the things actually are? And so, one of the things I wanted to go over is lately, for some reason, God has been talking to me a lot about um, missiles, specifically javelins, and also thrust vector, different kinds of propulsion. And one of the things that I feel he has talked to me about is, stuff that I absolutely had no idea of. Like, I wasn't really paying attention to this whole Yemeni, Houthi, Hamas, yada yada, because I just don't know that stuff. Like, I really don't. And I don't know about these terrorist organizations. I don't know anything about, you know, um, geopolitical military movements. I just don't know, right? Like, I'm one of those people, I watch the news, I see it, and I'm just like, okay, they're doing that for some reason, but we're sending money to them. So why are we fighting them? And yada yada. Like, I just don't get it, right? And a huge part of that also has to deal with, there's corruption in the upper echelons of government, like blah, 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 whatever. I get it, right? But for some reason, I would pray a lot, ask for words of knowledge or for a clearer understanding. And a lot of the words that I have been getting lately were specifically about missiles and about weaponry, right? And so I got this word on, let me see, the 23rd of December. There's an energy signature, watch the missile, a foreign castle, cataclysmic interference. And this is a reference to Watchmen when Dr. Manhattan is talking about cataclysmic interference and not being able to see the future because of the tachyons and all that stuff, right? And so the Lord also told me that there would be the framing of an individual, the framing of somebody. Someone is framed by the quote unquote hero, right? Um, And so I didn't know what this meant. Also, for some reason, that month he also said, anyone that has thallium poisoning, the antidote is Prussian blue. I don't know what that is, right? Uh, then I had another word on the 29th, right? And this is another reference to a missile. Behold, as the guardian launches his javelin, and blessed is his strike, and true is his aim, behold, a discovery of ships, right? And there's a lot more to this word, but the reason why I keep being fixated on the missiles is because this is something that I had absolutely no knowledge of, right? Like I have no knowledge on this other than, I hear that someone's, getting hit by missiles. I know that semiconductors are used in missiles, whatever, whatever. Um, but as far as the mechanisms and the science of it, I know absolutely nothing, right? And so, a couple days passed by, and again, another word on missiles, right? Now, this took place January 2nd, and I wrote the javelin is cast. Um, thrust vectors, thrust vectors and missiles, okay? And this is when I understood, okay, I'm hearing about a military campaign taking place over there. Um, and that's when I started paying attention, right? That's when I started looking up, like, oh, they're shooting missiles, they're doing this, they're doing that. And I was like, okay. And then I had a word that said exceeding many, many missiles cast at once on target, rifle, not wing based missile spins. Keep in mind, I don't know anything about the mechanics of this stuff. Nothing, right? Around that time, I had a friend that just became obsessed with Rubik's cubes, right? And I was like, dude, right, like what's going on, whatever. And so, like I became interested in the Rubik's cubes as well because I was like, this is something I've never been able to solve. Like I'm cool with like learning how to solve it, right? And so as I have this week of exploring one of these things, right? That's when I start doing my research into missiles and the anatomy of the missile, right? And so let's go over here. So get this. I started just putting this stuff into the computer. Spin stabilization. In aerospace engineering, spin stabilization is a method of stabilizing a satellite or a launch vehicle by means of spin, an example, rotation along the longitudinal axis. The concept originates from the conservation of angular momentum as applied to ballistics, where the spin is commonly obtained by means of rifling. Okay? For most satellite applications, this approach has been superseded by the three axis stabilization. Now, like I said, I don't know jack about any of this, right? And so I'm there asking God, like, why are you telling me about the history of, or like the mechanics of missiles, right? Around this time, he gives me a word of knowledge and he tells me, uh, look at Turkey, right? But the way he said it wasn't look at Turkey. The way he said it was Asia Minor. And so I was like, what is Asia Minor? So I have to Google it. Okay, Asia Minor is Turkey. Um, and get this, something else that I also came across as I'm Googling um, Turkey missiles. As I'm Googling all these things, right? Mind you, I have no idea what this stuff is. Turkey inks deal to replace four foreign made weapons with local types. The deals, finalized on January 20th with defense contractor Roketsan, another domestic organization, set the stage for mass production of the Kia Torpedo, the Atmaka cruise missile, and the Sapan air defense weapon, all made by Roketsan. These systems will help fortify Turkish Navy's strike power. Um, Again, another word of knowledge that I was like, what? Like, what? And I want to look for where I wrote Asia Minor because this is the point in time where I was like, okay, something is going on. I'm getting deep in the sauce, or I'm just getting words of knowledge about these things. Um, okay, many missiles cast at once on target, rifle not wing based missile spins. Syria, possible collateral, possible victim of location. Tunisia and Turkey, contested territory. I got this word on the 20th, right? I don't know why I am extremely fixated on this, right? I don't know why this is just important to me. But around this time, I also received another word, right? And this these thrust vectors, right? Let me see right here. So the word I received is that the missile was not wing based and that it was rifled, so it's spun, right? But also when the Lord told me, I want you to read about the history of the Rubik's Cube. So I start reading about the history of the Rubik's Cube. And the Lord told me that this thing was invented to create an internal pivot mechanism, right? But also so that each part could move independently of the other. And so I asked him, okay, Lord, what are you telling me this? And then he said, think of thrust vectors. And I was like, are you telling me that there will be a weapon that has thrust vectors on it that like is able to change directions because the thrust vectors can move independently of each other? Mind you, like I said, I don't know about this. So I know that there are people out there that probably know more about this or that could, give me some kind of insight, right? But a huge part of me saying this was because I received another reference, right? And so the Lord showed me, you guys know in Tomb Raider, right? When they're fighting that big statue, right? The one that has like all the faces and it like twists, right? So God showed me he first before he told me the Rubik's stuff, he showed me that, and then he showed me the Rubik's cube where the multiple faces and like segments of each face can move, right? And then he told me the quote that takes place in it. And so let me read to y'all that quote. Now, this quote comes from William Blake, and it is from a poem he wrote. Um, this is a quatrain, right? And it goes as follows: to see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. And I asked the Lord, what does this mean? You're like, is this infinity? Is this a weapon that has not been seen by man, right? Because when I saw the eternity in an hour, I don't know why I got the sense that it was a weapon, right? I got the sense, I'm not going to say nuke vibes, but I just got a weird sense of like, I recalled all the times that people have mused, right, or thought about how do nuclear weapons affect space and time, right? And so I just was like, you know what? I'm crazy. I'm just like experiencing something strange. I'm making cross curricular connections that are probably not connected at all. But I also got a strange enlightenment. And that enlightenment was the tiniest of actions, right? The grain of sand, the flower that we see heaven in, all the largest things in the world are connected to all the smaller ones, right? And so God told me, what happens if the smallest act of kindness could dismantle a bomb across the world? And then he showed me the butterfly effect, right? where we hold the wings of a butterfly and suddenly a tsunami goes off. It was a concept very similar to that. And he told me, a lot of people lose faith because they don't see quote unquote acts of God, right? And even the smallest miracles are acts of God because we don't know what rippling effects they may have over the world. And I was like, okay, what does this have to do with the missiles in the Middle East? Like, why did you teach me about that? Why are you telling me about this? Or like, why are you giving me words of knowledge about, weapons of war? And the question I felt, or the answer I feel I got was, if the smallest act can have life changing, results, do you think more people would create small acts of kindness for that end, right? And I thought to myself, are you telling me that, you know, me being a good noodle, can affect a war across the world? And the answer I got was yes, right? But this is not to be confused with, oh, I can achieve God's favor with works or whatever. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, if you love God, if you accept Him as your Savior, what if the tiny little miracles that you perform on, is it a micro level, affect the macro level things, right? And so he told me there's nothing new under the sun. He says, I want you to look at the Middle East, and then I want you to read about a battle that took place in the past. And so he showed me this right here, right? And I asked him, okay, what are we going to read about? And something that the Lord has been telling me is, I want you to get acquainted with war and strategy, right? And this is why I kind of started this channel because, in my first episode, vlog, whatever you want to call it, uh, this was something that I felt like he was leading me to because this is all that it's about lately. And I bought some books on war that he told me to buy. And he said, I want you to read the first battle in your book. And so I read it, and it is the Battle of Marathon, right? And something that took place in this Battle of Marathon is that there was a valley and the Persians went through it. And when they had to go through it, since they were almost like funneled in, they were attacked on all sides. And that's how the battle was won, right? And so he told me, what's going on here? And I was like, well, we could say that there is a valley, right? In this channel that's going on with Yemen and Israel and yada yada. And, they're attacking these ships, blah, blah, blah. I was like, it does mirror what you have to say. And he's like, okay, and then what happened? Now, I'm going to read a little snippet of this book to y'all, right? Traditionally, the Greeks did not pursue their enemies once they had driven them from the battlefield. In this case, however, they chased the Persians down to the shore and captured 7 of their galleys, the Persians fighting a rear guard action to prevent the Greeks from setting fire to other ships. One of the Greek commanders, Callimachus, was killed, and another Greek had his arm chopped off while he was hanging on to a Persian ship as it pulled away. Now, this was extremely interesting to me, right? Because then the news came out of these Navy SEALs that had to do um, some kind of ship mission popped out. And I was like, this is so weird, right? Like he said, there's nothing new under the sun. If it's happening, it has happened in the past, right? And this stood out to me because I was like, wow, we're seeing a replay of another battle in history, right? And so let's continue, right? So this battle was overwhelming. They killed a lot of their enemy, and as soon as possible, therefore, Miltiades ordered a messenger to run 26 miles to Athens with news of his victory. This epic journey was the first marathon. Um, Something that the Lord had told me, right? was about a battle that was going to take place. And he told me in the download and whatever you want to call it, he said, stick the landing. And this was the word about Turkey, right? That I received like that 1 week of the 20th. And I was like, this is so, there's so much going on right now. And this is like, I, if you get words of knowledge or whatever, you know that because time is simultaneous, you can get a word of knowledge over the course of several days. And then you kind of have to see like what connects or what sticks. And so I had gotten this word of you need to stick the landing. Your score is going to exceed the rubrics. And this is when it has to do with Turkey, right? And I also got a word about an amphibious operation, right? Now, I didn't know that landing was a military term. It wasn't until I read this that I read that it was a military term, right? And so let's continue. The marathon defeat had only been a tactical setback for Dottis because he still had a massive force under his control. He sailed towards Athens where he intended to make a second landing. So when I read second landing, suddenly the word that the Lord had given me where he said, stick the landing, became something else, right? And so I decided to look it up and let me see, is it this one? Is it here? Okay. So I look up this word and I come to find that there is a main landing and then a second landing. Configuration of the coastline. Favorable landing conditions are usually found in harbors, bays, and indentations in the coastline. Such formations, however, favor the concentration of enemy artillery fire in the entrances and, furthermore, permit the defender to bring flanking fire upon the boats from automatic weapons and anti-boat guns from the shores flanking the entrance. Enemy weapons so located must be neutralized by either naval gunfire or the leading element of the landing force before the boats make the main landing come within effective range of such flanking fire, right? And so I'm just blown away by this, right? Because I'm like, wow, I am being told in real time, like, what this, like, I asked the Lord to teach me about what was going on, and He's teaching me about it. And for some of you watching, hey, this is common knowledge, or how can I, um, have faith in the fact that you know what's going on or whatever, right? Um, or that you receive these words of knowledge after you ask God about it, right? And I mean, I'm not here to prove anything to anyone, but what I am saying is like, I do feel like the hand of God is over whatever is going on out there. And I, I've gotten words of knowledge from God before. This is one of the first times that it's happening where I'm getting a lot of military and war related words and stuff. Mind you, I have gotten them in the past, but not to this level of detail, right? And so, what's my point for today? My point for today is that there are a lot of things that we don't know about, right? And it's sometimes not our job to know about it. But if we surrender and let go, what happened with Job, right? What happened with Job? Job was always asking God for justification for what he was going through. And God had to humble him. He had to tell him, how can you possibly think to understand my ways? Were you there when I created the earth? Were you there when I put wisdom in the animals? Were you there when, are you there when I tell the clouds to rain, when I tell the hail to storm down? No, you're not there. You don't understand that. And something that I feel like I also got downloaded was all y'all had to surrender, right? So we've reached a point in life, right? In conflict, in history, where as an observer, right, as someone that's just living life and trying to do my best, I see a level of frustration in people that I've never seen before in my life. And mind you, I am young, right? But in our youth, we have experienced quite a bit of things. There's been COVID, there's been wars, terrorist attacks, this, that, whatever, right? And it just is like more and more like aliens in Miami, the Middle East, this stuff is going on, and the border crisis, and this and that, and whatever. And I feel like mankind has reached a point of surrender where it's like, I'm not even surprised anymore. And for a long time, we wanted to do things in our means, right? And this is where God also told me the story of Sarah, right? He's like, I made a promise to them and I told them I was going to give them a child. They were going to have their miracle. And so what does Sarah do, right? She can't have this kid. She goes, she gets her servant to have a kid with her husband, but he wasn't the miracle because later on, what ended up happening? They ended up having their miracle child, right? And so I'm getting all these words from God, right? And God was telling me, all you have to do is surrender to me, and I will deliver on my promise. And I told him, God, did I have to surrender to you and tell you that I knew I wasn't powerful to take on the world and all the evil in the world for something to happen? And I'm not saying this is about me. I'm saying this is about us as a collective um, group of, Christians or God fearing individuals that like, oh, I can be, tip the scales if I work this job, or I can do this, or I can do that. And it's like, no, maybe all you got to do is surrender, because in our arrogance, we believe that we can make mountains move, but there's only God that can do that. So it's like, do I have to surrender that belief into you? Do I have to surrender that belief that the mountain can be moved, but only by you? Right? And so what do we do as we wait for that mountain to move? We complain, we don't listen, we keep falling into sin. And then that's when God showed me how long Moses and his people wandered in the desert. That took 40 years, right? But that was a trip that could have been completed in days, in days. And why did God make that not happen? Because they gave in to false idols. They got frustrated. They were complaining. They were always, just telling God all these bad things. And instead of being grateful, instead of having gratitude for the few things that they did have. And, I got all these words of knowledge, and, I'm no weapons expert, but I believe there will be a new weapon that will be unveiled in that area. And I believe that it will be in conjunction with an amphibious campaign, right? And I also believe, one, that the Lord, I hope he uses this. I hope it happens. If it doesn't happen, I just look like an idiot, right? But if it does, then I hope that God prophesying this, or telling me this to share, um, leads you to him, right? Because when God gives you the Holy Spirit and his friendship, you will know all kinds of hidden things. Like there's been other stuff that he's told me, like he was telling me about physics and time, and like giving me demonstrations on words of knowledge and why they came out like a day apart. And because of him, I understand that time is simultaneous. And he gave me a literal visual representation of how it goes, how it's structured. And it's like, how can I possibly, put that to words? I don't even, you know, but whatever. That's not the point. The point is, I'm going to continue this in another video. I really hope it wasn't as jarbled up as I feel it kind of was, but I think we should go ahead and watch the news on what's going on over there, because I do believe the hand of God is on it. And maybe we're going to see some miracles that we can't believe, but also some unveilings of, new technologies that we've never seen before. And, prayers to everyone out there. And I'll see y'all in the next one.